Hi everyone, how's the going? How's the lockdown? I hope you guys are okay. We actually have to follow the soap so that you come back when you're healthy because we still need you. This is Kiwalabye George William, Trinity College Nabingo. I'm presenting for S.2. The topic is river system in East Africa. Yes, this is actually the term river is not new to you or the rivers. Yeah, we can see that it is a body of water that flows in a defined channel. So we see that normally rivers flow from raised land to what we call the lowlands. So in our diagram, you can see that the river, actually the arrow in blue is showing from the start the sources of the river. So we see that rivers normally originate from areas which receive heavy rainfall and those which have got snow. So you can see that because they are at a higher altitude or at higher gradient, you can see that river actually flows by the force of gravity. So you can see that rivers generally flow from raised areas like mountains or hills, and then they pour their water in the lowlands. So lowlands can be in terms of swamps, they can be lakes, they can be seas or oceans. Now, as the river flows, we can see that it carries out three types of work. We have river erosion, we have river transport, and river deposition. So we can see that in our first diagram or first picture on your left, we see how powerful a river can be, that it can actually carry out or it can erode material basing on the strength of material or the resistance of material vis-a-vis the power of water and on which gradient the river is flowing. But we see that in the initial stages of the river, erosion is very powerful. Then in the middle, we have the transportation. So we see that the river can actually transport materials. Then lastly, on our right, we actually see that the river can deposit material. So we see that where it deposits material, the area is low-lying, or it is a lowland. That is where the river actually has no enough power or enough energy to carry the load anymore. So it does a lot of deposition. Now what you see are actually some of the materials being deposited by the river. Now, as the river tries to erode, you can see that it undergoes several processes. So we have what we call the attrition process. This is where the river this is where the load of the river is broken down due to collision, and that one reduces the material into smaller pieces, as you see in our picture. So here we see that for this case, the material in form of rocks can actually collide. So they collide because they are being taken by water. So they collide with one another, and in that process, we see that weathering also does its work. That is chemical weathering during that period. So we see that eventually the material that was bigger actually breaks into smaller pieces, and those are the materials that you see in our picture. Then number two, we have corrosion. So this is the wearing of the sides and the beds of the river channel by its load. So we see that the load itself during the time of movement, during the time of flowing, that is the river, we can see that it comes with a load, and if that load is actually very powerful, it goes on uh, taking out some of the weaker materials within the valley and actually besides the valley. So in our picture, you can see that the sides of the valley of this river have actually been eroded, and that one widens the side. Then we look at solution. This is where this is actually we look at a solvent action of the river, especially in the limestone areas. So we see that from the concept of rocks in East Africa, limestone is among the rocks um, which are actually weaker, so they are eroded faster. So we see that during the time see that when the river is flowing in limestone areas, there is a solution which takes place. So in our picture, you can see that the river has actually changed the color because of solution. So that is the limestone area where the river flows. Then we look at the hydraulic action, and that's where this is actually where the force of moving water is able to remove the loose particles. So loose particles can be sandstone, it can be sand itself, and even other materials. So we can see that here in this situation, the river can actually come and weaken those materials. I've talked about silt and even sand, and actually after weakening them, they are taken by the river up to other areas. Then we have the types of erosion. This is where actually the erosion undergoes three types. So here we look at the headward erosion, and this is where the river increases its length by cutting back at its source. So we see that in our picture, this is a part of the source of the river. So when the river is lengthening its channel, it actually it is forced to come back, or it is forced to erode backwards. It erodes from the source, and it actually lengthens this channel, and that one will accommodate more water to enable the continuous flow. Then we have lateral erosion. So this is where the river erodes the banks. Banks are known as the sides of the river channel. So we can see that the river actually uses its force, but this happens in the middle stage. In the middle stage, when water is not flowing at very high speed, but it is able to take away the sides of the channel. And that's where we find that the channel widens and forms what we call meanders. Then finally, we look at the vertical erosion. So vertical erosion, this is where the biggest part of the erosion, over 95%, is in the bed. So we see that in this area, we see that the water actually erodes the bed. The bed is the bottom part of the valley. So we see that it deepens that channel and forms what we call a V-shaped valley, or you can call it a narrow valley. Yeah, in conclusion, we see that we shall actually look at the stages of the river. We actually shall we have seen that the major work of the river is normally, in terms of erosion, carried out in the initial stages. So we can see that headward and vertical erosion are actually carried out in the initial stages of the river. Then lateral erosion is carried out in the middle stage. So in our next slides, we shall actually look at the types of work, other types of work carried by the river. Thank you so much. We shall continue from there.